What could drive three men to carry out one of the most shocking and brutal crimes in recent history? How does a simple rap battle, a competition of words and talent, escalate into an act of unthinkable violence? And how does one survivor find the strength to endure, overcome impossible odds, and live to share their story? On New Year's Day 2014, an abandoned lot in Columbus, Georgia, became the backdrop for a crime so horrific that even the most experienced investigators found themselves questioning the depths of human cruelty. A young woman's skill and confidence during a freestyle rap battle struck a nerve with three men. But rather than accepting defeat, they sought vengeance. Vengeance so ruthless, so meticulously planned, that it would send shockwaves across the nation. At gunpoint, she was forced to drive to a remote location where she found herself alone, outnumbered, and overpowered. Subjected to relentless brutality, shot 10 times, and left for dead, her attackers were certain they had silenced her forever, but they were wrong. This is more than just a crime story. It's a stark confrontation with unsettling realities. How do we explain the entitlement that leads to such acts? Why does society struggle to protect women from these horrors? And most importantly, how do we ensure voices like hers are heard and justice is served? As we unravel this story, we'll examine the egos and entitlement that fueled the attack, the courage of a survivor who refused to be erased, and the justice that demanded accountability. This isn't an easy story to hear, but it's one we all need to understand. Stay with us. It's time to face the questions we can no longer ignore. She wasn't just talented, she was fearless, standing toe-to-toe with the best, proving that skill knew no gender. But in a world where confidence is often mistaken for arrogance, and where strong women are sometimes seen as threats, her success didn't sit well with everyone. Among those who took issue with Brielle's rise were Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Garin, three men whose egos could not handle being outshined. What happened next would not only test Brielle's strength, but expose the darkest corners of human nature. Brielle Saunders was a young, dynamic woman with dreams as vast as her talent. Growing up in Columbus, Georgia, she was immersed in music from an early age. Her father, a gospel musician, taught her the power of lyrics, rhythm, and storytelling, lessons that would shape her future. By her teenage years, Brielle had made a name for herself in the local freestyle rap scene where her sharp wit and effortless lyrical flow earned her respect in a space largely dominated by men. Brielle's unwavering confidence in her craft made her a standout wherever she went, drawing crowds eager to witness her transform words into poetry. But for her, rap was never just about fame. It was about connection, inspiration, and proving that a woman's voice in hip-hop could be just as powerful, just as commanding as any man's. On that fateful night, this very confidence led her to Garden Drive, a well-known gathering spot for local rappers. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was there to compete, to showcase her skill, and to embrace the adrenaline rush of the mic. What she didn't realize was that her strength and success would ignite envy and rage in the wrong people. And in the harrowing moments that followed, one truth would emerge. The resilience Brielle had spent years building, the fire that set her apart, would become the very thing that saved her life. Now, let's turn to the men who forever altered the course of Brielle's life. Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Garin. Each of them carried a past that, when examined closely, painted a troubling picture, a pattern of anger, violence, and a blatant disregard for others. Robert Johnson was the ringleader. At 25 years old, he was already deeply familiar with the legal system. His juvenile record revealed a disturbing history, including a conviction for forcing an 8-year-old girl to commit horrific acts when he was only 13. He insisted the victim had followed him willingly, a chilling insight into his twisted sense of entitlement. As an adult, Johnson's temper and obsession with control defined his relationships. Friends portrayed him as someone who relished intimidation, leveraging his physical stature, and cutting words to dominate and manipulate those around him. Katori Glover, 26, was quieter but equally dangerous. Those who knew him described a man who appeared calm on the surface but could explode without warning. His criminal record included charges of petty theft and assault, but what stood out most was his impulsiveness. Glover was the type who acted first and thought later, a perilous trait when paired with Johnson's manipulative nature. Joey Garan, the youngest of the trio at 22, was often overlooked and underestimated. He was the follower, the one who craved validation by attaching himself to stronger personalities. However, his insecurities didn't make him any less complicit. In fact, Garen's unpredictability frequently intensified situations, as his desperate need to prove himself drove him to reckless actions that left chaos and destruction in their wake. Together, these three men formed a volatile group. Johnson was the leader, the one who dictated the tone and direction. Glover served as the enforcer, executing orders without question or hesitation. Garen, driven by his desperate need for acceptance, filled in the gaps, adding an extra layer of instability to an already combustible mix. What united them that night on Garden Drive was their shared craving for dominance and recognition. However, what distinguished them was their inability to cope with rejection. Brielle's victory in the rap battle wasn't merely a loss to them, it was a direct blow to their egos. And in their world, where control was paramount, that blow demanded retaliation. The night began with an atmosphere brimming with energy and excitement, the kind that often defined underground rap scenes. The party house on Garden Drive pulsed with music, laughter, and the rapid-fire rhythm of freestyle rap battles. Brielle Saunders was in her element, confident, skilled, and ready to face anyone bold enough to step up to the mic. The house was alive with anticipation as Brielle, renowned for her sharp wit and lyrical prowess, went head-to-head with some of the best freestyle rappers in the room. The crowd pressed closer, erupting in cheers with every clever line and cutting retort. Among those watching were Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Garan. For a while, the rap battle appeared to be nothing more than a friendly competition. Brielle's energy and talent captivated everyone, including the three men. They observed her with a growing sense of fascination, her ability to dominate the battle stirring a blend of admiration and irritation within them. Eventually, the battle shifted from the crowded house to the quieter confines of Brielle's car, where she, Johnson, Glover, and Garan continued to freestyle. For a brief moment, it seemed like a harmless extension of the night's festivities. Inside the car, the mood stayed light at first. Laughter and rhymes filled the space as the group took turns displaying their lyrical skills. Brielle maintained her composure effortlessly, her verses flowing with the same confidence that had won over the crowd earlier. However, as the night progressed, the dynamic began to change. Johnson and Glover exchanged subtle glances, their attitudes shifting almost imperceptibly. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, though Brielle, absorbed in the music in the moment, didn't immediately pick up on it. Then, without warning, Glover pulled out a gun. The air turned cold and heavy as Johnson followed suit, his weapon now pointed directly at Brielle. The laughter and camaraderie vanished in an instant. The men ordered Brielle to start driving, their voices harsh and commanding. Her heart raced as she struggled to comprehend the sudden turn of events. She obeyed, clutching the steering, wheeled tightly as she drove through the streets, unsure of their destination or their intentions. The tension inside the car was unbearable, each moment dragging on endlessly, amplifying her fear. As they continued, Glover's impatience flared, and he demanded she pull over. He seized control of the wheel, shoving Brielle into the passenger seat. The men exchanged crude and menacing remarks, their words dripping with malice. Garan, seated in the back, stayed mostly quiet, but his restless fidgeting betrayed his unease, signaling he understood the grim direction this was taking. The car eventually came to a halt at an abandoned lot on Far Road, a location chosen for its seclusion. The area was devoid of light, sound, or any potential witnesses to the horrors about to occur. The cold night air stung Brielle's skin as she sat paralyzed in the passenger seat, the gravity of the situation crushing her like a heavy, suffocating weight. The eerie stillness of the night was interrupted only by the men's low murmurs and the frantic pounding of her own heartbeat. The lot was a desolate wasteland, overrun with weeds and scattered with debris. Shadows sprawled across the barren ground, illuminated faintly by the pale moonlight. Brielle felt the chill seeping into her, but it wasn't just the cold. It was fear, deep and unrelenting. She pleaded with the men, her voice steady despite the terror surging through her. She begged them to release her, trying to reason with them, hoping to reach any shred of humanity they might still possess. But her pleas were met with cruel laughter, their mocking tones slicing through the darkness. To them, she was no longer a person. She was an object, a vessel for their anger and frustration. The laughter grew louder as Johnson and Glover waved their weapons menacingly, leaving no doubt that escape was impossible. What followed was an assault so horrifying that the details would later leave a courtroom in stunned silence. Brielle was forced to strip at gunpoint, her dignity stripped away piece by piece. The men degraded her, taking turns assaulting her, both physically and sexually. They used their guns as tools of humiliation, the cold metal pressing against her skin as they inflicted unimaginable pain. They had a good old time. They were passing me around like a piece of cake, Brielle would later testify in court, her voice trembling under the weight of those words. She endured repeated acts of brutality, each one calculated to shatter her spirit. Yet even in the face of such cruelty, Brielle's strength endured. She clung to the faint hope that somehow, some way she would survive this nightmare. The men's laughter echoed across the desolate lot as they took turns violating her. For them, it was a twisted game. For Brielle, it was a desperate fight for her life. When the assault finally ended, the men weren't finished. They attempted to force Brielle into the trunk of her car, their exact plans unclear, but their malicious intent unmistakable. It was in that moment that Brielle saw her chance. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, she broke free and ran. She didn't think, she just ran, her bare feet slamming against the cold, rough ground as gunshots exploded behind her. Johnson and Glover opened fire, their bullets striking her again and again. Brielle was hit 10 times, her body collapsing to the ground under the weight of her injuries. But even then, she wasn't done fighting. She lay still, her breathing shallow, pretending to be dead as the men approached. Believing their work was complete, the men retrieved a gas can from the trunk of the car. They doused Brielle in gasoline, the acrid stench filling the air, and set her ablaze. Flames engulfed her body as the men fled, convinced they had erased all evidence of their crime. But Brielle wasn't finished. Against all odds, she found the strength to move. Through the searing pain of her burns and the agony of her bullet wounds, she crawled inch by inch toward safety. Her body was broken, but her will to survive remained unshaken. Bystanders eventually discovered Brielle, alerted by the weak echoes of her whimpers. If you're hooked on this story, just wait. Things are about to take an even darker turn. Before we dive in, take a second to hit that quick to subscribe Ross button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. They summoned emergency services, and she was urgently transported to the hospital, her survival teetering on the edge of possibility. Medical professionals were awestruck by her resilience, declaring her survival a near impossible feat. Her body, ravaged by burns and punctured by gunfire, bore the scars of unimaginable suffering. Yet against all logic, she clung to life. Her ordeal was far from concluded. The atrocities in that desolate lot marked merely the first chapter in her relentless pursuit of justice. Join us as we delve into how Brielle's unyielding resolve would blaze a path through the darkness, her voice becoming the catalyst for holding 3 perpetrators accountable. While Brielle Saunders battled for survival in intensive care, the machinery of justice shuddered into motion. The investigation fell to Lieutenant Lance Deaton, a veteran detective whose career had been steeped in the grim realities of violent crime. Even for him, the case defied precedent. Descriptions from paramedics and hospital staff painted a tableau of savagery so extreme, Deaton knew this would eclipse the most gruesome cases he'd encountered. Deaton surveyed the Far Road site, a bleak expanse still scarred by the night's atrocities. Charred earth and splintered debris formed a macabre mosaic under the daylight. The scene yielded shell casings, tire imprints, and shreds of fabric, mute witnesses to the carnage. Forensic teams scoured the area, their precision unyielding as they cataloged every shred of evidence. Each photograph, measurement, and sample would become a thread in the tapestry of proof, vital to dismantling the lies of those responsible and anchoring truth in the courtroom's unflinching gaze. As the investigation progressed, witnesses from the Garden Drive party began stepping forward. Some recalled seeing Brielle leave with 3 men, identifying them as Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Guerin. Their descriptions aligned with the details Brielle provided from her hospital bed, her voice unwavering despite the excruciating pain she endured. Forensic evidence further tightened the case against the perpetrators. DNA samples collected from the crime scene and Brielle's body conclusively linked the three men to the assault, erasing any shadow of doubt. Deaton's team worked relentlessly, meticulously reconstructing the events of that night, each new piece of evidence strengthening the case against the trio. Once Johnson, Glover, and Guerin were identified as suspects, they were quickly arrested. During interrogations, their stories began to crumble. Each man tried to deflect blame, asserting that the events of that night had been consensual. However, their claims clashed starkly with the mountain of evidence. Brielle's harrowing yet precise testimony, corroborating witness accounts, and the forensic findings that left no room for ambiguity. The interrogation footage revealed their growing desperation. Johnson exuded a chilling arrogance, insisting that Brielle had willingly participated in the night's activities. Glover remained outwardly composed but faltered when confronted with the irrefutable DNA evidence. Guerin, the youngest and most insecure of the group, eventually broke down under the pressure, his nervous demeanor and contradictory statements only further incriminating him and his accomplices. The arrests of Johnson, Glover, and Guerin sent shockwaves through the community. As the harrowing details of the attack emerged, public outrage surged. The sheer brutality of the crime, coupled with the perpetrator's apparent lack of remorse, left many in stunned disbelief. Rallies sprang up in support of Brielle, with community members uniting to demand justice and ensure her voice would not be silenced. Lieutenant Lance Deaton, reflecting on the case, later described it as one of the most savage he had ever encountered. Yet he also highlighted the extraordinary courage displayed by Brielle and the relentless determination of his team to hold her attackers accountable. As the men awaited trial, the stage was set for a courtroom showdown that would lay bare the depths of their depravity and challenge the resilience of the justice system. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as Brielle Saunders took the stand. Every gaze was fixed on her, yet she remained composed, her resolve unshaken. Her presence was not just a testament to her courage, but also to her unwavering determination to ensure her attackers faced the consequences of their actions. Brielle's testimony was profoundly heartbreaking. In vivid, unflinching detail, she recounted the horrors of that night. She described the laughter that had filled the car before it turned to threats, the biting cold of the abandoned lot, and the searing pain of the assault. Every word she spoke carried the weight of her trauma, yet she delivered them with a strength that held the courtroom in awe. "When they were done, they tried to throw me in the trunk like I was trash," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I thought I was going to die, but I ran. I had to run." Gasps rippled through the gallery as she described being shot 10 times, doused in gasoline and set on fire. "They didn't think I'd survive," she continued, "but I did, and I'm here today because I refused to let them win." The defense attorneys attempted to counter her testimony, pleading for leniency for their clients. They painted Johnson, Glover, and Guerin as men who had made terrible mistakes, but were capable of redemption. "My client has expressed deep remorse," said Adam Deaver, Katori Glover's attorney. "He's willing to take responsibility for his actions, and I ask this court to consider his potential for rehabilitation." But prosecutor Sardana Daly was relentless. With unwavering determination, she methodically dismantled the defense's arguments, presenting an overwhelming case that left no room for doubt. She revealed the cold reality of the defendants' actions and their utter lack of remorse. "These men didn't just attack Brielle, they dehumanized her," Daly declared. "Their actions were calculated, cruel, and entirely devoid of empathy. They didn't show her mercy then, and they don't deserve mercy now." Daly pointed to the interrogation videos, where the men falsely claimed Brielle had consented to the assault, fully aware they had forced her at gunpoint. She also highlighted Johnson's juvenile record, including a prior sexual offense, to emphasize the threat they posed to society. "They treated her like an object, disposable and insignificant," Daly stated. "This court must send a clear message that such evil will not go unpunished." Judge Art Smith III then delivered his verdict with the gravity the case demanded. Johnson, Glover, and Guerin sat motionless as he read out their sentences. the weight of their punishment sinking in with every word. Johnson and Glover each received 6 life sentences plus 95 years, while Guerin was sentenced to 5 life sentences plus 70 years. Their crimes, aggravated assault, rape, sodomy, kidnapping, and more, were met with the harshest penalties the law could impose. Addressing the defendants, Judge Smith's words were pointed and harsh. "The testimony in this case is among the most brutal I've heard in my tenure as a Superior Court judge," he said. "You treated Miss Saunders as though her life had no value, as though she was disposable. But she proved you wrong. Her will to survive has brought us here today, and now you must face the consequences of your inhumanity." The sentences were met with relief and applause from the gallery, where Brielle's family and supporters stood in solidarity. The community's demand for justice had been heard, and the men who sought to destroy Brielle's life would now spend the rest of theirs behind bars. The trial was a victory for justice, but it also stood as a testament to Brielle's unwavering courage. She had faced her attackers head-on, shared her harrowing story, and ensured they would never harm another person again. As the courtroom doors closed, one truth was undeniable. This case was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for dignity, accountability, and the enduring power of resilience. Stay with us as we reflect on the aftermath of the case and how Brielle's strength continues to inspire everyone around her. Brielle Saunders' recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Her physical wounds, 10 gunshot injuries and severe burns, demanded months of intensive care and rehabilitation. But the emotional scars? They would take even longer to heal. Surrounded by her family and community, Brielle drew strength from their unwavering support. They rallied around her, proving that, while the attack had shattered her body, her spirit remained unbreakable. The impact of Brielle's story went far beyond her personal journey. Her case ignited a call for justice, shining a spotlight on the epidemic of violence against women. Community leaders pushed for changes in local policies, including increased protections for vulnerable individuals, harsher penalties for violent offenders. Brielle's bravery inspired countless others to speak out, turning her story not just into one of pain, but of empowerment. This case serves as a stark reminder of the necessity of justice and the resilience of the human spirit. Brielle's courage showed us that even in the face of unthinkable pain, survival and triumph are possible. But it also leaves us with a question. What can we, as a society, do to ensure that no one else suffers such torment? The answer lies in awareness, accountability, and a commitment to standing with survivors. As we reflect on this story, we are reminded of Brielle Saunders' remarkable bravery, the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement, and the accountability delivered in the courtroom. This was a case that revealed the depths of human cruelty, but also illuminated the strength of one woman's will to survive. We invite you to reflect on this story. What lessons can we draw from it? How can we as a society do more to protect those at risk and hold perpetrators accountable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more content that explores the triumph of justice and the strength of survivors. Together we can ensure these stories are heard and these lessons are never forgotten.